Welcome to Our Power's November Power Lunch. My name is Seth Berry. I'm very fortunate to be the executive director of Our Power. And Our Power is the only Maine nonprofit that's advocating specifically for energy democracy and a rapid and just transition to clean energy independence here in Maine. More voice and more choice for Maine people when it comes to energy and power. I'm going to launch a quick poll right now just to take the temperature of the group around the idea of clean energy and sort of the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So it's a quick pre-check, and I'm going to go ahead and launch this, and you can answer those two quick questions with whatever comes to mind. There's no, you're not going to get a grade on this, so just let us know what you think about those two questions. And while that poll is running, just a reminder that power lunches are typically held on Fridays with a special guest presenting for 20 minutes or so, and then some Q&A and discussion. Today, we're very fortunate to have Dave Welz with us. And Dave is the principal of Welz Communications, and he's here brought to us by the Rural Climate Partnership today. Dave has lived in the rural town of Durango, Colorado, more than 3 hours from the nearest interstate, like some of you here in Maine, for 30 years. He believes that thoughtful, strategic communication is key to helping solve the big and small problems we face. As communications director for Conservation Lands Foundation, Dave helped to protect and conserve millions of acres of public lands critical for wildlife habitat, local economies, and recreation by supporting over 60 grassroots groups across the country and working with elected and administration officials. He also, with America for the Beautiful for All Coalition, guided communications efforts for a coalition of more than 100 nonprofit organizations that focuses on justice-centered conservation and climate goals. And Dave now works with the Rural Climate Partnership, as I mentioned, honing and deploying their narrative frameworks, with the goal of ensuring rural communities aren't left out and don't opt out of the opportunities and benefits of climate-friendly practices. And in Dave's free time, he enjoys the mountains, rivers, and vibrant rural communities of Southwest Colorado and the Four Corners region. So we're super, super excited to welcome Dave today. And Dave, before I turn it over to you, I'm just going to end that poll. And it looks like we have about half and half saying the message versus the messenger. Slight advantage to the messenger. 59% saying both equally, and then on leading with only 12% said climate harm, 24% said shared values, 47% local benefits, and 18% all of the above. So there are the results for those that want to see them. And we're going to turn next to Dave. We have my colleague Isabel here driving the presentation and assisting. And we're going to go pretty quickly through some slides that Dave has prepared for us today. And then as you're listening to Dave, if you want to pop a question in the chat or the better yet, the Q&A function, if you know how to use that, either one is fine, Q&A or chat. Go ahead and do that as he's speaking. We will get to as many of your questions as possible during the Q&A after Dave's presentation. So we're going to come back to that same poll, by the way, towards the end of this. So it'll be interesting to see how things evolve. But now, Dave, the floor is yours. Tell us, we're in a rural part of the country too, just like you, and we want to know, how can we use good communication strategy to win back more support for clean energy? It's declined lately. We're concerned about it. How can we win it back in the rural areas?
Yeah, I appreciate the intro. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I know everyone's time is valuable, so thank you for letting me take some of yours, and I hope it's really beneficial, and I look forward to the Q&A at the end. Like Seth mentioned, I'm going to be moving pretty quickly, but two things. We'll have time to circle back at the end. And also, I think we'll be able to make this deck available to folks. So you don't have to scribble all this down in your notes or take a bunch of screenshots. You should be able to have access to it afterwards. And you can, it's really, it's a working guide, if you will. I hope people will use it to inform their everyday work. So with that, we're here to talk about transforming the rural narrative on climate solutions. And if you want to advance to the next slide, Isabel, the reason for that is that the road to climate progress runs right through rural America. We're not going to be able to reach really any of our goals without the support of rural America. And unfortunately, over the past number of years, we've done a pretty lousy job of getting people to buy in. There's lots of different reasons for that, but what we're going to focus on is not the past failures, but the path forward. So, with the next slide, our agenda today is to define our audience, take a look at what the opportunity and what the challenges are, and then we're going to talk through something called the order of operations, which, math nerds will appreciate. For the rest of us, it's just a way of saying that there is a sequence here that is important to how we go through this and use this information. And we'll be going through it a number of times just to reinforce. But here for the first time, it's meeting on shared values, centering working people, demonstrating rural credibility, and then, and only then, moving to policy or practice. So, finding our audience. Who are they? What are their values? What are their aspirations? What are their problems? Because good communication is always solving somebody's problem, right? So, just a quick exercise on the next slide to get us sort of in mode and thinking. We all have kind of, I would say many of us have reached our position. This may be different for some of the elected officials out there, but lots of folks who work in the nonprofit sector, who work in climate and renewable, we've gotten to where we are largely by talking the talk with people who agree with us. Now, some organizers out there may say, "No, not me. I've done it the hard way." Good for you. You have valuable knowledge, and that's where some of this at least came from. But in general, the climate movement is better at talking to ourselves than we are at talking to people who are not already bought in. And that's been a critical failure. So we're going to think about how we communicate differently to different audiences. And I want you to just take a minute to think about some of the key ones. If you're in the nonprofit or anything like that, you need funders. You can't do any of your work without funders. So folks at Seth's level and many others spend their time thinking about how to convince funders and what do they want to hear. They want to hear how their resources can be put to work mitigating climate change. Climate champions, which could be any of your existing supporters. These are folks that also groups depend on for their activation, for their donation, for their volunteerism. They want to know how their actions can activate existing supporters to take action and how they can reach new audiences. But today we're going to be entirely focused over here on this third box, which is rural audiences, which is where we've done the worst job to date, I would say. And it extends, by the way, to lots of people who aren't bought in, but really we're focusing geographically for lots of good reasons today on rural folks. And what we're going to talk to them about to be effective is how changes can save them money, preserve their way of life, and offer them tools to succeed. So with the next slide, we're just going to set the table a little bit for what we're doing and what we're not doing. When we talk about narrative shift, we've got to understand that we're not here today to talk about national narrative efforts, what the headline is in the New York Times, targeting decision makers at the federal or administration or national level. We are over on the left here talking about local and regional narrative work and how we can use storytelling and some of the tools we're going to talk about today to build buy-in that we have so far not been able to build very effectively. And when I say that, I'm aware that I'm well aware that many of you have done great work in this regard, including Seth's organization, and I don't mean to keep harping on that. It's more of a general context of why I think this data is so helpful and important. It really can just extend the successes that we have had. And so sometimes when I talk about the failures, I'm really talking about a 20-year stretch nationally of not being able to shift local and regional narratives very effectively. So with that, it is a long process. It's not something we're going to go out and do overnight. It's something that takes consistency and continuity and investment of time. It's a long, muddy road, is one of the ways we think about it, and we hope that some of this information has given us the four-wheel drive for our strategy to be able to tackle it. So, with that said, a lot of the climate movement over the past few decades has made the mistake of leading with climate catastrophe. It's gotten the people on board who we now know as our existing champions. People who have a moral sense of this, people who are prone to take action in this regard. This has worked for them. This has not worked for people who do not buy in, and the people that we now need to reach next in order to make further progress. So for them, we don't lead with climate catastrophe. There's a lot of our research uncovered that it just doesn't work. What does work is a place-based, rural-led benefits or economic forward strategy, and that's what we're going to be looking at here today. So first we'll look at a couple of the obstacles, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I think you're probably all really familiar with this, but I just want to validate what some people run into and kind of the headwinds that we face in this work. Misinformation, and I would add to that partisan politics as identity. When people take on partisan politics as identity, you are not really going to be able to shift that very well because you're not going to be able to shift someone's identity. What you can do is work around it and move past it. And that's what we're going to try and do today. There's a lack of supported local journalism to counter other interests out there like corporate and right-wing media that have very different interests in mind. And then, of course, as always, there is limited rural communications capacity and funding. So I'm sure these obstacles sound familiar to you. So how do we move past that to do this narrative shift at the local level? This is kind of where we start to get nuts and bolts. What can I apply to my daily work? We're going to start by elevating credible local messengers to change the narrative and amplify our local story. So I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. Many of you are probably already doing this, but if you're not, this is a key that you have to unlock. Creating compelling content and storytelling that meets people on shared values. And we're going to talk more about what those shared values are. And then finally, amplifying it with distribution and frequency so that people hear it over and over. None of this work is one-off stuff. You all probably know that. We've got to shift our strategy and then employ it over and over again and do it over time. So next we have what the narrative framework gives us. This is really, this is kind of, this isn't how we do the work, but this is why this is important. This is kind of research tested messaging that can bolster our existing strategy. And I've worked for a lot of groups that couldn't afford or didn't have the resources to invest and get data like this. And so I'm really grateful to be able to help other folks get it through RCP's work. This is expensive stuff, and we had some of the best folks out there collecting it and sorting through it. I'm the messenger in this case. I didn't do this data build, but the folks that did are some of the best in the country at it. So it gives us a framework for engaging our audiences around shared values. It emphasizes working families and the economy, and we're going to work on some tangible messaging that resonates across constituencies. It was developed, like I said, with a lot of investment and a lot of time, intensive review of the existing research, 6 months research phase, 3,000 conversations in 17 states. I'll let you look at the rest of the stats here for a second. but trust that this is a pretty thorough and pretty credible data effort that we're evaluating here. So next, we're going to reintroduce this order of operations, and we have a visual of it, and we're going to come back to this each time we move in the order. But we're going to start with shared values because you don't really get anywhere until you do that. A lot of division out there, but the good news is that we are united by shared values. And understanding our audience means understanding which of those values we share with them and can pinpoint and talk about and focus on, really to draw them in, make them feel seen in the picture that we're painting, and have a place in common to meet. That is the start of a conversation. It is not, let me tell you what you need to hear. So this is what the research uncovered, and the results were could not have been more clear. These are the top five, and it's worth pointing out that these are salient across geographies, across race and place. And we're gonna go through them quickly. I usually spend a lot more time on each one of these, but I know you guys are smart and can follow along. So here they are. Connectedness to nature. And this actually in some ways may not seem intuitive, but it may to some of us who live in rural areas. We understand that we live amongst greener, more open spaces. We depend on working lands economically, and also for lifestyle and recreation. So that is actually really good news that this is a place we can start. Now, there may be different language around it. There can be slightly different take on protecting it, for example, and what that means and who gets to make those decisions. But connectedness to nature was number one, and that's really good news. Number two, the news gets a little worse, but we have to acknowledge this. Disconnectedness and resentment, this is a real thing, and if you've ever talked to somebody who's, like if you're having a terrible day and you're talking to someone and they don't acknowledge what's happening to you at all, they kind of lose you, right? You can't just plow past that. It's a reality, and we have to not just try and skip over it or gloss over it. We have to acknowledge it and find ways to find common ground there. There are good reasons in some cases. In other cases, it can be misinformation. But in a lot of cases, there's a track record, a history behind this feeling. Top-down decisions made from a faraway city. These are real legitimate reasons for the sense of disconnectedness. No one is listening to us. Things are changing around us. We're being left behind. Jobs are being lost. Farms are being lost. And it doesn't do us any good not to acknowledge that. We have to. Number three is rootedness. Rootedness. Many of our rural communities are filled with people who go back generations. They literally have blood in the soil, and there's good news and bad news there, but we're going to focus on the good news. Rootedness really can lead to some of the ways that people want to take care of their community, and so the way that we frame some of these solutions in that way is connected to the rootedness that we're tapping into that people feel. Number four is self-reliance. Some of you may be familiar with, like, for example, the John Deere right to repair case. This is supported by 95% of farmers. For those of you not familiar, the idea is that they want to be able to repair their own machinery, and thanks to some computer chips and some other recent innovations, they're not able to do that. They've taken John Deere to task over that. This goes back to self-reliance. They can't just pop into the city for a service on something. They got to go down the road to their neighbor and take care of it themselves, or with the help of their community. And then number five is hardworking. That is an identity that many people share proudly, across all kinds of geographies and race and place. And we're going to learn how to center working people in order to make more compelling content. Back to our order of operations. Now we're at how do we do that? One of the most powerful ways, and this hardworking value is at the root of it, is to center working people. So the next slide shows us centering working people as heroes. And this really means framing policies to show how they impact and empower working people. And it means showing them, and it means naming the work and putting this at the center of our storytelling. And so we're going to look at some ways to do that. The next slide shows, you can go ahead and advance 2 slides, and we'll have an example of a tweet that just shows, it just goes, it's kind of nuts and bolts here. We name the working people. As small business owners, our ability to pay our employees is important. Okay, so that brings people in. They feel the small business owners. We're naming working people. We're naming the concerns of working people, like lowering costs, and we're showing it through our visuals. Next slide is supporting and valuing the importance of work. This is obviously directly connected to centering working people, acknowledging and appreciate hardworking people and what they should expect in return. This is kind of about people don't want to hand out, they want to hand up. So the next slide will show us that we don't want to use the term reward. We want to use terms of respect for working people. This is a strongly sort of rural American value where we want the tools and opportunities to succeed. We want to be equipped to succeed. We don't want the government to come in and give us handouts, or we don't expect them to succeed on our behalf. Get an example there. And then again, with the climate disaster or greenhouse gas emissions or other sort of familiar phrases to us, not our lead. Our lead is to make people's lives better and improve economies. And I'm talking about not just the big E economy, but also local and regional and community and even personal economies. I was doing this presentation recently to a group that was quite young, and I had the word pocketbook issues in there. And I realized that most of these folks, that didn't really mean anything to them. So I'm talking about personal economies, kitchen table. I think folks still know what it means to sit around the kitchen table and talk about your family's personal economics. But the pocketbook is kind of going away. Next, we get to situating working people as engines of the economy. When people have what they need to survive and prosper, it's an inherent economic good. This is obviously visible in small communities where you have people employed, they support local businesses, and you have a thriving community. And when one piece of that goes away, things start to collapse. Fourth one that relates to this is positioning government and corporations in a supporting role, not a central role, obviously. And I'm going to go back 1 second here, but Seth brought up a great point the other day, which is to truly center working people requires a little bit of humility. It requires ourselves to step out of the picture ourselves and just ensure that when we're telling our stories, that that's what's at the center of it. And you can still talk about government if you have to. You can still talk about corporations, and we'll get to villainy here in a second. But we want to make sure we're centering working people. Government isn't the hero, working people are. People in rural communities aren't inherently opposed to an active role for government relating to jobs in the economy. They understand that interface, but there can be pushback about what government actually can do. And again, for good reason. Again, there's history, there's track record. We all understand that. So, folks who have worked in communications and looked at storytelling elements know this one. Every story needs a villain, we're taught, but I want you to just be careful here. What we've learned in the research is that there's a lot of pushback on this, and it has its limits. So, what we found is that people understand the concept of greed, and they know perfectly well that corporations can be prone to it. They're not too Pollyanna about that, but villains are villains because of what they do, not who they are. Meaning we can't just go around calling out the big companies for being villains. We have to name the villainy and be talking specifically about what it was that hurt the rural community or the rural farmer or what we're doing. Again, villains are villains because of their actions, not who they are. And if you've ever called out like a big egg or some other, big corporation in the op-ed, and then you go into an adjacent rural community and find out that that's the sponsor of the local horse arena that everyone goes to on Friday night, you understand how quickly you can shoot yourself in the foot. It's nuanced. You don't have to completely leave it alone, but you just have to be very careful and aware of that nuance. And then the final piece here in this one is relating the economy to communities and families. That's the way to sort of connect it all and bring it around to what matters to folks in their community. Phrases like makes economic sense and is good for everyone. Working class voters really look to kitchen table economic issues framed in universal terms. They know when their communities are doing well and when they're not. And that's the kind of economic benefit that we want to focus on and talk about. All right, so just to look back on that little stretch, it's not about climate, it's about working people. There's the pocketbook word again. Personal economy, personal economics, personal finances, and their families, family economics. Messenger is crucial, and our job is to find ways to resonate with people on the shared value of hard work and demonstrate that climate solutions are good for rural economies. Here's one I'll just let you take a look at for a second. I'm going to stop talking for 15 seconds and give you all a break. So you can see some of the things we talked about on display there. So the next section is also critical, demonstrating rural credibility. How can we work with trusted messengers and effective messages? Back to our order of operations. This is where we are within it. If you want to advance one, we have met on shared values. We have learned how to center working people. Now we need to demonstrate rural credibility. And the good news is that for many of us, this is where we live and who we are anyway. And so we just have to tap into that, things we know. Don't be afraid to include that part of you in the work. Sometimes we get so into working with our funders and our champions that we're not putting enough of our own rural experience in the mix. And I think that some of the folks that in this room have done that effectively in Seth's organization, but you can almost not have too much of a focus on it. This goes back to the poll we did earlier. We had some various comments. It was equal, or perhaps even tilted towards the message. But the key here is that it is very clearly 75% messenger and 25% message. And I'm sorry if I let a graphic slipped up over the word there, but 75-25. So I just want to let that sink in. 75% messenger, 25% message. That's how important the messenger is. So if you're not putting a lot of focus on cultivating a stable of local rural messengers who can take your important messages out, then you need to start doing that, because that is kind of the key that makes the whole thing work. You've already got them. You already work with them. You got to cultivate them into messengers. I'm sure almost all of you understand this, but I just want to kind of hammer on it a little bit because it couldn't have been more clear in the research. You do not get very far with a great message and somebody who people do not believe or do not want to listen to delivering it. You will get much further with a decent message and a local, credible, trusted messenger. And there's lots more. I could do a whole presentation just on that, but that's the takeaway. And so that's all sort of table setting. That is all how you build the buy-in, meet people where they are, capture their attention by centering working people and speaking to their values, demonstrating the rural credibility that adds to that buy-in and sets the table for, okay, now I might be able to listen to what else this person has to say. And only then is it time to move to policy and practice. That is your area of expertise. That is where you finally get to talk about policies and whatever else, but only when we really have a sense that we have done the table setting in order to get there. Order of operations one more time. And then this is where your knowledge shines. Like I said, your work focuses on policies that will benefit working families. Now that you've set the table with these other elements, you have an opportunity to talk to somebody about how that works, frame those policies in an economic light with working people at the center. And now you have messaging that really can resonate and work effectively with rural audiences. I'm going to talk a little bit just briefly about pivot questions. And this isn't the kind of like I got asked a question by a journalist that I don't like, so I'm going to pivot and just say what I planned on saying anyway and not answer the question. This kind of pivot question is really like asking questions to the other person. And the application for this can be for organizers in a one-on-one conversation. It could be with electeds in a room full of people. It could also be like in a social media strategy where, sometimes we tell our social media managers, hey, you're not engaging enough, or you got to ask more questions. Well, this is an opportunity to ask pivot questions to let the other person lead the conversation, gather information about what's important to them, and then you can take that and turn around and talk about the policy or practice that applies to whatever they have said. It's a way of letting them feel like, not feel, but actually lead the conversation. Here's some examples down here. We'll go back one slide. I just want to give people a chance on those. Yeah. So, like, what is standing in the way of growing more things for people to eat? Reducing chemical inputs on the farm, using solar, citing issues in agricultural land. There's all kinds of questions that we can ask so that people are leading the conversation and then we have the answers for them. So, just looking backwards a little bit, we have some sort of do's and don'ts. I've had some people print this out and like hang it, behind their computer display on their desk. Really, you can just, when you're doing an op-ed or whatever it is, whatever the storytelling that you're doing, you can kind of use this like a checklist. Am I using benefits forward framing, or am I doing climate alarmism? Am I centering working people, or am I leading with how bad, some corporation or some other problem is? Am I focusing on opportunities and tools? And am I approaching with a tone of respect rather than preaching? And there you have it, a sort of souped up run through of what took a number of years to research, develop, and build out. But I hope we've been able to present it effectively in this time. And I'll hand it back to Seth.
Dave, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And just to prove to you, and you know you did not pay me to do this, I have printed out that second to last slide, and it was on my wall, literally right next to me. So we're using it at our power, and definitely appreciate the chance to go deeper with it. Questions from folks are you can put them in that Q&A. We don't have any open questions in the Q&A yet. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you can type something in there. Also in the chat, and we welcome either entry point. So far, we haven't seen any, but I think as people warm up here over the next 20 minutes, we can hopefully get to some additional questions. But really great presentation, Dave. Yeah, thank you so much. And I guess I'll start with a question, which is, can you? And I think you actually I sort of know the answer to this, but can you give one or two additional samples of messaging that works, so make it a little more concrete?
Yeah, happy to do that. Do you have access? Let me ask, because right now we're sharing off your screen. Do you have access to
Yeah.
a couple of ad links?
I
Why don't you go?
think so. Isabel, do you have them, or I can?
One of us can put those up. I don't know if
Yeah.
I sent them to Isabel, but I certainly can real quick.
You
And
did, but I just need to go back to my email to pull them out. So give me half a
that
second.
works.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna stop
no
sharing my
problem.
screen.
While you're doing that, there is a question here from Barbara. Dave, Barbara's town is looking at going solar, putting it on the town office. It is a rural Maine town, and how would you recommend? How would you think about convincing people to to do this? To obviously there's some investment. Some people might be concerned about all kinds of things, real and imagined. So how would you take on that particular challenge?
Is this relating to different geographies within Maine? Is
I
that
think
this question?
so.
Yeah.
Barbara, I believe, is from a
Oh, I'm
town
sorry. That was
that's.
Kat's question. I
Oh yeah,
missed.
no, we'll get to Cat. We'll get to Cat too. But this is in the Q&A. Barbara says her town's thinking about putting solar on the roof of the town office. So,
Yeah.
how would you kind of make sure that that goes forward if you're Barbara?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one of the things that's been most effective, and I've done some work on energy siting as well.
Hmm.
Um, the thing that works best, honestly, is, and you either have it or you don't. So I don't know that we'll find out, and then we'll look at some other possibilities. But you have to have success stories from some place that those folks can relate to. That's your credible, trusted messenger is the other guy in the other town who actually did this and you can find him and get him to say, we weren't sure about this, but this is what happened. This is how they worked with us, and this has been the result. That is your home run, and that is what people in your town will look at most easily and say, okay. And we've had, I think we've got an example even maybe that I can pull up, but yeah, we've had some. We had like the director of transportation for a town talking about the benefits and how they worked with him and how smoothly
Hmm.
it went. We've had the one of our great messengers that we found was a superintendent of schools that was able to talk about the benefits from the revenue coming into the school system and how they were able to buy new buses. This is like the tangible local benefits argument and also
Hmm.
utilizing the credible message.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can. Am I allowed to share my screen? Do you know, Isabel?
Yeah, I
Can
think
you
so. I
make
think
me?
I think I've allowed it for everyone. And
Let's see if we can do that. Problem playing a video. Oh, I see. Okay.
doing this in real time.
Yes, we are. The nuts and bolts. Let's try this. Okay, now if I hit share,
Yeah,
I want
that should work.
this screen.
There we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see if we can do this.
We are on my family's farm. We're starting to harvest soybeans for grain, and we're also harvesting corn for silage. My family did take a little bit of a risk and put some windmills and a weather station on the land. There was a financial piece that came directly to my parents, a 20-plus-year contract. That was a secondary source of income to help balance out the ups and downs of the agricultural markets. It was kind of interesting first year when we turned our beef cows out on the field. Like any curious cow, you could definitely see they were right up at the base of the windmill, taste testing it and right in it. It really did not affect what they were doing. We haven't had any issues with health of our livestock or wildlife interaction with the windmills. From a cropping standpoint, it really is a benefit that a lot of farmers have seen, not maybe as much in the windmill itself, but in some of the access roads. As farmers, we wear a lot of different hats. We might wear the accountant hat. We might wear the mechanic's hat. We wear the animal and crop management hat every day. Windmills are a piece that fit into that budget. 2 years ago, we had record high corn and soybean prices at harvest time. This year, we are at or below break even when it comes to harvesting and selling our grain. I think that's where renewable energy can have a big impact to helping to even out some of those ups and downs of some of our agricultural commodities.
Dave, that's great. Let me just interject with another question. Maybe we can come back to another video.
Yeah.
I know you do have another. So I think you saw Kat's question earlier. She is in very rural Maine, way up in northern Aroostook County, looks a little bit like the landscape you just showed us, actually, believe it or not. But she attends meetings often virtually with folks in urban or southern Maine. And I guess her question about that is how she says, how do you expect northern Mainers to identify with the problems of the North? And I guess I'll let you interpret that. I'm not entirely sure. She goes on to say, our lifestyles need to change to achieve our state's ambitious climate goals, but electricity is expensive and unreliable. So any of that kind of triggers some thoughts for you, I guess.
One thought is that they're probably not going to. You really have to you have to find the framing that speaks to the benefits to the people you're speaking to. Um, we had I don't mean to call any group out, but we had a group in the Midwest that was trying to put up billboards thanking rural communities for the benefits that like Milwaukee was seeing from the renewable siting. And it was a bad idea.
Yep.
What the billboards should have been talking about was any benefit to the place where they were. And so I know it can be difficult, and this isn't like I don't have all the silver bullet answers for every campaign out there, but I can tell you where to focus your energy in trying to find the answer is what is the language that will speak to the Northern Mainers, and who can I get to do that speaking? Those are the keys where you can focus.
Okay, so perfect segue. We have someone who wants to, I think, challenge you on the messenger versus message. Like, where does that come from? The 75% messenger, really? Is that accurate? Actually accurate? And
it's
seem
accurate
correct to this person.
It's accurate in what our research uncovered in rural communities, and it goes back to some of the other things that we talked about, the sense of disconnectedness and resentment. And one of the slides I didn't have in this presentation, but it's like you're probably familiar with the saying, in a rural community, the worst thing you can say is I'm from the government and I'm here to help, and the second worst thing you can say is I'm from the city and I'm here to help you. And it's a joke. It's also based on a long history and a legitimate track record of disillusionment, failed and broken promises. And so yes, that's why the door is often closed until there is a messenger who I have some reason to believe in. And until then, my ears are closed to the message. And that's why it's such a wide gap there, is because you could have the best message in the world, and if the person's ears are closed to you, it does not matter.
The next questions are really kind of drilling down on this. So partisan politics as identity. How do we talk with folks? I mean, assuming that people do take on their ideology as their identity to some extent and their tribe. How do we engage with people who seem to be just parroting talking points from anti-renewables folks and DC folks?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to tell you that you can have a conversation with every single person that's going to be successful. But one of the things that we found was that we spend a lot of our time sort of alarmed and worried about and maybe focusing on this 20% that is what we'd call immovable. And by the way, it's mirrored on the left, for example. There's 20% that are sort of immovable on that side. But what's more interesting to folks like us who are trying to work to get things done is this 60%, quite a large audience in the middle that is somewhat persuadable. And so that's where we want to focus our energies. And for those people, they may still have triggers. They may still have sort of identity politics wrapped up in this. That is why you have to go around and not step on those mines. And that's what we're trying to learn to do here.
So let's pursue that. So you're talking to a rural person. This is Jill's question. They're very invested in telling you what they think the answer is. They seem very entrenched. How do you approach that person?
Yeah, this goes back to the shared values. It sounds like you're already you're moved past. You're talking with someone about like policy, right, or solutions, and you haven't maybe met on shared values yet. So I guess that would be my advice, is that it really, this isn't to say that this is easy or that this is convenient. And it comes out in all different kinds of ways, depending on what angle of approach you're taking, what your work is. Are you an organizer going door to door? Are you, there's lots of different folks in our world who are taking different approaches to this, but this is really for communications folks. I would say it's applicable to lots of us, but for communications folks who are trying to figure out what to put out there and how to talk to people that are not just the people on our newsletter list. The way to do that is subtly to meet on shared values. Are you showing someone in dirty jeans and muddy boots doing the work first and foremost? And then are you having them talked about how some solution helped them? Those are some examples of ways we can break it down. In other cases, it is difficult to know how to apply this. I'm not going to pretend that this will answer everyone's challenges, but it's the best, most research-driven information we have. And I bet you that another thing I'll throw out, maybe this is a good time to do it, is that I am available to take people a little deeper into this information and the application of it. RCP has covered me to do one-on-one coaching sessions with folks. So if you're out there and you're part of this presentation and you want to know more about how to deploy this narrative in your specific work, you can actually follow up with me, and we can dedicate a few hours to figuring out how it applies to your specific issues and see if we can get it deployed in some tangible way.
Love it. That's great. Ed's question kind of goes to similar similar issues of ideology, and maybe to some extent the 20% versus the 60%. One of the reasons we held this webinar, Dave, and invited you to come speak is we were seeing polling back in June or so that showed that clean energy was underwater. That fewer people supported clean energy than not in America. And
there's a negative narrative around it right now.
Right. So that's what we're up against. Ed's question goes to, what's driving that? And obviously it's fossil fuel and corporate interests that are promoting the wrong narratives and putting the wrong ideas in people's heads. Do we call that out? Is it helpful to call out that funding specifically, and point to what's behind those ads, or is it better to just kind of provide the positives?
I would say that you can call it out, especially when you can identify where they are not acting in the rural community's best interest. And I know you know examples of that. So that's a way where you can say, hey, they're saying this, but this is not benefiting you. This is benefiting them. I do think that's okay to call out. And then I will cite another source, which is probably more insidious, but also a little bit more within our sphere of influence. And that is that development companies are often a big part of the problem here. And that's why the success stories are so important right now to get out there, because what's countering them is a lot of missteps by industrial scale developers who have come in and run roughshod over local communities. And so some of the work in a separate bucket that I'm trying to do is directly with some of the large developers, because they have done this and now they are reaping the negative benefits of it and going, why won't anybody let us come into their community? Well, so we are developing tools for them to say, look, you've got to own this. This is because you've been doing a terrible job in a lot of cases. You have not been listening. You have not been a good partner. And then those stories are near impossible to counter. In fact, the only way to counter them is to show that there are other good stories out there. But we decided that instead of playing whack-a-mole, we really ought to start working directly with the developers. So we have a whole work stream that is focused on working with those companies to help them do a better job when they come in. And to the extent that they were starting to run against brick walls, they are now very interested in this. So I don't know if that helps you, but that's a realistic assessment.
No, that's really interesting. And I think Our Power shares a lot of those concerns here in Maine. In fact, we participated in a larger regional group that produced a report this past spring. and it was really about community benefits. How do we make sure there are legitimate, tangible community benefits, not messages, but actual, benefits, and local ownership. Interestingly, the ownership of the energy project in part or in whole by communities was the number one opportunity that the report came up with for providing tangible benefits.
Yeah, I'm sure. But then there's also like revenue shares, and really it has so much to do with what kind of partner the developer acts like when they come into town, right? Are they really listening? Are they really elevating the concerns that they hear? Or is it just a dog and pony show that they're going to gloss over and move ahead and do whatever they want anyway? Rural people are not stupid, and they see that happening, and then they go tell their friends in the next county over and the next county over. So I would say that in your work, if you have developers, that's, we have some solutions in development, and we are already working, and I can refer you to our guy who's on the lead for that, and he is working very successfully with some of these larger siting companies on how to do this better. That's a force multiplier. That's going to be a lot easier to tout those successes than it is going to be to run around responding to, the last guys that came in here, right?
Right.
You can finish the story.
I'm going to do a couple of very quick ones. There are a number of comments about what I'll call, smaller scale, more distributed renewables, community power, microgrids, behind the meter. Do you find that it's easier to sell people on those kinds of solutions than the larger industrial scale, or no? You talk about them differently.
I think you talk about them differently, and I'll be honest with you. I just don't think I'm the right person to answer that question. I don't have enough experience with the smaller scale stuff to know. It sounds like there would be opportunities, and using some of the tools we talked about today, you can apply to that just as well, and if not easier, than you could to the larger stuff. I mean, the thing that jumps out to me is that there is not a sort of big corporation involved who's going to come in and potentially run roughshod, right? Is that true, Seth?
Yeah, I think that's true, and our experience has certainly been it is somewhat easier, for what that's worth. This is amazing. I think the final question may still be coming. I'm still open to like one or two more. I'm going to put the last poll, actually the same poll really, out there for folks to answer.
I can try and do the Megan Emelander video too. It's, I think, 1 minute long.
Yeah, please bring that up. And having a little trouble. I thought I shared the results of this poll already. This was the first one, pre-check.
Yeah.
So now I need to get to the.
We got Bob Bishop. I don't have Megan Emelander downloaded yet, but I got Bob Bishop.
There's the post check. Just interested in seeing what you think now. These are the same questions. Please answer them whatever comes to mind for you. Again, there's no right answer here, but we are interested in seeing if people's thinking evolved or shifted at all.
Will they be able to still see that poll if they share?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely.
My father and mother were farming here since the late 40s. When we were first approached about this project, we were in a financial situation where we needed to shore up cash flow. We had lost our value-added source of income because of the hog industry making a hard move in a new direction. It is a commercial level solar electric generating station, harvesting sunlight by the acre. We're not doing anything a whole lot different other than for the farmers' economics. We have no costs of input up front. So when you're trying to stabilize farmers' incomes, anything like this is just fantastic. Because there's some people who are retired, they will continue to own the land. It will be owned in the family for generations to come, because those dollars are going to pay car payments, college tuition, mortgage payments for grandchildren and great-grandchildren right on down the line. Renewable energy is very good for rural America.
That's great. That's great. And we do have one more question, which will be the last one. I'm going to save that until after I announce the results of the poll. Dave, 83% say the messenger is the most important. So you clearly got shifted people's thinking there. And meeting on shared values clearly came through. 53% say you lead with that. Local benefits, 32%. And I think it does suggest that we've taken something away from your talk today. I really appreciate it. The final question, Dave, is from Senator Nicole Grahowski, who's also a board member of Our Power. And she asks, how do we bring people in? How do we engage folks who would be good messengers to encourage them to step into that role? It might not be kind of what they train for, right? So how do we reach them and convince them to do it?
Yeah, it takes time. And that gets into a whole, I mean, that's in the sort of category of persuading our own champions to take the next step. And I could do a whole thing on that, but I would say that investment of time, this is not something where you just call someone up and see if they'll do it tomorrow. This really requires some cultivation, especially folks who maybe, I mean, think about it from their standpoint, right? They're taking a risk, they're putting themselves out there, they're in a small community, and they really need to be able to trust you. So this is like, however you have to do it, you have to build a trust level with that person that will then make them feel comfortable, because like look at Bob Bishop, right? He was someone who wouldn't have like jumped up at a meeting and raised his hand to make that video that we just made. But we had worked with him and developed a relationship with him over time and developed the trust required to convince him to do that.
That is great. Dave, this has been incredibly helpful. I've learned a lot. I feel like I've deepened my understanding of this guidance right here, and I'm excited to put it to work with your help. There was a question about you meeting with other groups, and if you don't mind, I'll share your contact information, because I think
please do.
Been very open to that.
I'm open to giving this presentation to other groups, and I'm also, like I said, through Our Power, I'm open to doing one-on-one sessions with folks.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. That's it for our November Power Lunch. 2 weeks from now, we are having another Power Lunch, which will focus on the work of Maine's Office of the Public Advocate, which helped with Our Power and the Fight the Hike Coalition to beat back CMP's recent rate hike request. Heather Sanborn will be our guest speaker, the public advocate herself. So please mark your calendar for that Friday, December 5th from 12 to 1. Make sure you're on our email list at Our Power Maine. You can sign up to be on our email list and be aware of other opportunities to do good work in this space. Thanks, as always, to Our Power's amazing board and my colleague Isabel. I'm so lucky to work with all of them. And to all of you, the policy and business leaders and community leaders who have joined us here today. Dave, thanks again for being our guest. And this has been recorded and will be posted within a week or so on our website. So Dave, one more time, thank you so much. Really great to hear from you.
Thank you all. Really appreciate the opportunity.